A billionaire CEO receives a proposal in a rare language and asks the maid's daughter for help. She translates it in seconds and reveals a $1 million fraud hidden in the contract. Before we begin, tell me something about where you live. What's the weather like today? The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Marcus Whitmore's corner office on the 42nd floor of the Whitmore Technologies Tower in downtown Seattle. At 38, Marcus commanded a technology empire worth $3 billion, his sharp features and steel gray eyes reflecting years of calculated decisions and ruthless business acumen. Today, however, those eyes held something unfamiliar: desperation. This is absolutely unacceptable. Marcus slammed his hand on the mahogany desk, making his assistant Jennifer jump. I've had 3 translation services look at this contract, and each one gave me a different version. How am I supposed to make a $100 million decision based on guesswork? The document in question sat mockingly on his desk. 15 pages of dense classical Mandarin, mixed with ancient legal terminology that even modern Chinese scholars struggled to decipher. The proposal came from the Liu Corporation, offering a merger that could expand Whitmore Technologies into the Asian market overnight. The deadline was tomorrow at noon. Jennifer nervously adjusted her glasses. Mr. Whitmore, I've contacted every translation expert on the West Coast. Classical Mandarin specialists are extremely rare, and the legal terminology makes it even more complex. The fastest we could get someone here is next week. Next week? Marcus's voice was dangerously quiet. Jennifer, next week I'll either be signing the deal of the decade or watching Liu Corporation approach my competitors. Next week is useless to me. As Jennifer hurried out, Marcus walked to his floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city below. He'd built everything from nothing. His father's small software company transformed into a tech giant through sheer determination and strategic brilliance. But brilliance meant nothing if he couldn't understand the very words that would shape his company's future. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. Maria Chen, his housekeeper of 5 years, stood hesitantly at the door. At 42, Maria was a quiet, hard-working woman who managed his Seattle penthouse and sometimes his downtown office with invisible efficiency. She rarely spoke unless spoken to, a ghost in his empire. Mr. Whitmore, I'm so sorry to disturb you. Maria's voice trembled slightly. Jennifer mentioned you needed help with a Chinese document. I know it's not my place, but unless you secretly have a PhD in classical Chinese linguistics, Maria, I don't see how. Marcus stopped abruptly. Behind Maria's legs, partially hidden by her uniform, stood a small girl with dark, intelligent eyes. Is that your daughter? Yes, sir. Isabella, she's 7. I had to bring her today because school had early dismissal. She's been sitting quietly in the break room, but Maria hesitated, her hands twisting nervously. I overheard the translators struggling with the document. Isabella, she studies languages. It's just a hobby. Probably nothing professional, but maybe. Marcus barely suppressed a frustrated laugh. A 7-year-old child? His $100 million deal hanging by a thread? And his housekeeper suggested an elementary school student? But as his eyes met Isabella's steady gaze, something stopped his dismissal. The child wasn't intimidated by the massive office or his imposing presence. She simply watched him with curious, analytical eyes that seemed far older than 7. You study Chinese? Marcus asked, his tone gentler than he'd intended. Mandarin, Cantonese, and classical Chinese scripts, Isabella replied softly, her English perfect but carrying the careful enunciation of someone who thought in multiple languages. Also Japanese, Korean, French, Spanish, and some Arabic. Mama brings home books from the library. Languages are like puzzles. Marcus exchanged a skeptical glance with Jennifer, who had returned to the office. A 7-year-old claiming fluency in 7 languages? Yet something about the child's calm confidence gave him pause. He had nothing to lose and everything to gain. Can you read this? Marcus placed the contract in front of Isabella. The small girl pulled a chair to the desk, her feet dangling several inches from the floor, and leaned over the document. Her dark eyes scanned the first page with surprising speed, then the second. By the 3rd page, her small finger traced lines of text, her lips moving silently. Maria shifted uncomfortably. Isabella, if it's too difficult. It's not difficult, Mama. It's just wrong. Isabella looked up at Marcus with disturbing intensity. Mr. Whitmore, this contract is designed to trick you. The room fell absolutely silent. Marcus felt his heartbeat accelerate. What do you mean, wrong? Isabella's small finger pointed to a paragraph in the middle of page 4. Here, this section uses an ancient legal term, hui lu zhuquan, that modern translators would interpret as mutual ownership. But in classical business Chinese, especially in contracts from the Qing dynasty legal framework, it specifically means reversible sovereignty. The Liu Corporation is offering you a partnership that gives them the right to claim full ownership of Whitmore Technologies within 3 years if certain conditions are met. Marcus snatched the document, his blood running cold. That's impossible. 3 translation services looked at this. They looked at it with modern eyes, Mr. Whitmore. Isabella turned to page 7. And here, this clause about technological exchange actually translates to technological subordination when you understand the contextual markers. You wouldn't be gaining access to their patents, you'd be surrendering yours. There are 7 more clauses like this throughout the contract. Someone wrote this knowing most Western translators would miss the archaic terminology. Jennifer gasped. Marcus felt the world tilt slightly. A 7-year-old child had just potentially saved him from the biggest mistake of his career. How could you possibly know this? Marcus demanded, not harshly but with genuine amazement. Isabella shrugged, a gesture so childlike it contrasted sharply with her previous analysis. I read a lot, Mr. Whitmore. Mama can't always afford toys or games, so I get books from the library. Last year I found a collection about Chinese commercial law history. It was fascinating, like seeing how people tried to outsmart each other across centuries. Languages aren't just words, they're puzzles where context is everything. Maria's eyes filled with tears. Isabella, I didn't know you were reading such complicated books. You told me they were about Chinese culture. They are, Mama. Legal history is culture. Isabella smiled at her mother with pure innocent affection before turning back to Marcus. Should I translate the rest accurately for you, Mr. Whitmore? I can write it out in English with notes explaining the contextual differences. Marcus stood frozen, his brilliant business mind racing through implications. This child, this 7-year-old daughter of his housekeeper, had casually unraveled a sophisticated fraud that would have destroyed everything he'd built. The genius wasn't just in her translation ability, it was in her contextual understanding, her ability to see patterns and deceptions that eluded professionals. Yes, Marcus finally managed. Yes, Isabella, please translate everything. As the small girl pulled paper toward her and began writing with careful precision, Marcus caught Jennifer's stunned expression. His assistant mouthed silently, "What just happened?" Marcus didn't have an answer. But as he watched Isabella Chen work, her small hand moving confidently across the page, occasionally pausing to consider the perfect English equivalent of a complex term, he felt something shift inside him. This wasn't just about the contract anymore. Who was this extraordinary child living in the shadows of his world? And how had he never noticed that genius was sitting in his break room, invisible and ignored? The document that was supposed to make his fortune had instead revealed something far more valuable, a mystery he suddenly needed to solve. But Marcus Whitmore had no idea that uncovering the truth about Isabella Chen would unravel secrets about his own past, secrets that would change everything. 2 hours later, Isabella finished her translation. Marcus sat across from the small girl, reading her meticulous work with growing astonishment. Not only had she identified every fraudulent clause, but she'd also provided alternative interpretations, historical context, and even suggested counterproposal language that would protect his interests while still allowing for legitimate partnership. Isabella, this is better than anything my legal team could have produced, Marcus said slowly. You're 7 years old. This shouldn't be possible. Isabella tilted her head, considering. My teacher says I'm ahead in reading, but she means I'm ahead of 2nd grade. She doesn't know about the other languages. Mama says people might think it's weird. Weird? Marcus felt a flash of anger, not at Maria or Isabella, but at a system that would label this extraordinary gift as strange rather than exceptional. Isabella, what you just did isn't weird. It's miraculous. Maria, who'd been sitting silently in the corner, stood abruptly. Mr. Whitmore, I appreciate your kindness, but we should go. Isabella has homework, and I've already taken too much of your time. Maria, wait. Marcus's voice stopped her. How long has Isabella been able to do this? The languages, the analysis. When did it start? Maria's expression became guarded. She's always been different, Mr. Whitmore. Even as a toddler, she'd memorize books after hearing them once. By 4, she was reading chapter books. I thought it was normal, that all children were like this if given enough books. But her teachers, they said she was unusual. Some suggested testing, but her voice broke slightly. Testing costs money, sir. And I was afraid of what they might find. Afraid they might take her away to some special program I couldn't afford, where I couldn't protect her. The raw pain in Maria's voice struck Marcus unexpectedly. He'd never really seen his housekeeper as a full person before. She was simply Maria, the woman who kept his spaces clean and organized. Now he saw a mother's fierce love and desperate fear, trying to shield her exceptional daughter from a world that might not understand her. Nobody's taking Isabella anywhere, Marcus said firmly. But Maria, a child like this needs proper education. The right schools, the right teachers. Schools require money, Mr. Whitmore. Maria's voice was quiet but steady. I work 2 jobs, cleaning your penthouse and 3 nights a week at a hotel. Isabella's father. He left when she was 2. Sent us some money for a while from California, then nothing. I barely keep us in our studio apartment. Special schools, gifted programs. Those are for families like yours, not families like mine. The words hung in the air, a gulf of privilege and possibility stretching between them. Marcus felt something uncomfortable twist in his chest. Was it shame? Responsibility? He wasn't sure. Isabella, seemingly oblivious to the tension, had pulled one of Marcus's business magazines toward her and was reading an article about international trade agreements. Her small face scrunched in concentration as she absorbed information meant for seasoned executives. What if I could help? Marcus heard himself say. Not as charity, but as investment. Isabella just saved my company from a catastrophic mistake. That has value. Significant value. Maria's eyes widened with alarm. Mr. Whitmore, I didn't bring Isabella here looking for money. I just wanted to help. I know. That's exactly why I'm offering. Marcus leaned forward, his business mind now clicking into a different kind of calculation. Maria, I compensate people for their expertise. Isabella provided expert analysis that my team couldn't match. That deserves recognition. More than that, it deserves cultivation. He turned to his computer, pulling up information. There's a school in Seattle, the Harrison Academy for Advanced Students. It's private, extremely selective, and they specialize in gifted children. I sit on their board. 1 phone call, and Isabella would have a full scholarship evaluation. Mr. Whitmore, Maria's voice trembled. Let me finish. Marcus pulled out his checkbook, writing quickly. This is a consulting fee for Isabella's work today. $25,000. That's not charity. That's standard compensation for the level of analysis she provided. Beyond that, I want to establish an educational fund for her. Nothing that obligates you or her to anything. Just resources available when needed. Maria stared at the check as if it might burst into flames. Sir, I can't accept this. It's too much. People will think I'm smart enough to recognize extraordinary talent when I see it. Marcus stood, walking to the windows again. The city lights were beginning to glow as evening approached. Maria, I've spent 20 years in business. I've interviewed thousands of candidates, worked with brilliant minds from MIT, Stanford, Harvard. What your daughter just did? I've never seen anything like it. And not just the translation and the contextual analysis, the strategic thinking. She sees patterns most adults miss. He turned back to face them. I don't know why Isabella has these abilities, but I know that wasting them because of circumstances beyond your control would be a tragedy. For her, yes, but also for whatever she might accomplish in the world if given the chance. Isabella finally looked up from her magazine. Mama, if I went to a special school, would I have to leave you? The question broke something in Maria's composure. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she knelt beside her daughter. No, mi amor. Never. We stay together always. Then I'd like to try the special school, Isabella said simply. If they have more books. And if Mr. Whitmore promises it won't hurt Mama's job. Marcus felt something crack in the armor he'd built around his heart over years of cutthroat business. This child, who'd just saved him millions, was worried about her mother's minimum wage cleaning position. Your mother's job is secure, Marcus said softly. In fact, I'm promoting her. Maria, starting Monday, you're my household manager. Salary, benefits, and regular hours that work around Isabella's school schedule. No more night shifts at hotels. Maria looked between her daughter and Marcus, her expression torn between hope and disbelief. Why are you doing this? It was a fair question. Marcus asked himself the same thing. The practical answer was that Isabella had saved him from fraud. But the truth was more complicated. Looking at this small girl, brilliant, curious, and completely unaware of how extraordinary she was, Marcus saw something he'd lost in his own climb to success, pure potential uncontaminated by cynicism or greed. Because it's the right thing to do, Marcus finally answered. And because I have a feeling that investing in Isabella Chen will be the smartest decision I've ever made. As Maria finally accepted the check with shaking hands, and Isabella returned to her magazine, Marcus pulled out his phone. He had calls to make, to Harrison Academy, to his lawyers about setting up an educational fund, and to Liu Corporation to firmly decline their fraudulent proposal. But first, he sent a message to Jennifer. Clear my morning schedule tomorrow. I'm taking Maria and Isabella to tour a school. As he pressed send, Marcus caught his reflection in the darkened window. For the first time in years, the man staring back at him looked like someone who'd done something meaningful. Not profitable, not strategic. Just good. He didn't know that tomorrow would bring revelations that would turn his world upside down. He didn't know that Isabella's extraordinary abilities were just the surface of a much deeper mystery. And he certainly didn't know that helping Maria and her daughter would lead him to uncover the most closely guarded secret of his own past. All Marcus knew was that something fundamental had shifted. The CEO who'd walked into his office that morning, obsessed with deals and dominance, felt like a stranger. The man standing here now had questions he'd never thought to ask. Who was Isabella Chen, really? Why did a 7-year-old possess knowledge that eluded experts? And why did looking at her sometimes give Marcus the strangest sensation, like looking at a mirror reflecting something he'd lost long ago? The answers would come, but they would cost him more than he'd ever imagined paying. The next morning, Marcus sat in his Bentley outside a modest apartment building in the Beacon Hill neighborhood, a world away from his penthouse in downtown Seattle. Maria had provided the address nervously, clearly uncomfortable with her employer seeing how she actually lived. When they emerged, Maria in a clean but worn dress, Isabella in carefully patched clothes carrying a backpack covered in library stickers, Marcus felt that uncomfortable twist again. The contrast between his wealth and their struggle wasn't abstract anymore. It was standing on the cracked sidewalk, squinting in the morning sun. Good morning, Mr. Whitmore, Isabella said cheerfully, climbing into the back seat with her mother. I brought my favorite books to show the school. Do you think they'll want to see them? Marcus glanced at the books as Maria carefully placed them beside Isabella. They weren't children's books. One was an intermediate French grammar text. Another was titled Comparative Linguistic Structures in Asian Languages. The third appeared to be a collection of classical Chinese poetry with English translations. I think they'll be very interested, Marcus said carefully, starting the car. The drive to Harrison Academy took them through increasingly affluent neighborhoods, and Marcus watched Maria's expression grow more anxious. By the time they reached the prestigious campus, all manicured lawns, modern architecture, and impossibly well-dressed students, she looked ready to bolt. Mr. Whitmore, I don't think this is right for us, Maria whispered as they walked toward the administration building. Look at these families. Look at their cars. We don't belong. Mama, that girl over there is reading Le Petit Prince in French. Isabella's excited whisper cut through her mother's anxiety. And that boy has a calculus textbook. How old do you think he is? Maybe 9. Do you think I could study calculus? Dr. Patricia Reynolds, the academy's director, met them personally, a courtesy Marcus knew was extended because of his board position and substantial donations. But as they settled in her office, something shifted. Dr. Reynolds' polite professionalism transformed into genuine interest as she spoke with Isabella. "So, Isabella, your mother tells me you enjoy reading," Dr. Reynolds began gently. "Yes, ma'am. Especially books about how languages evolved and influenced each other throughout history. Did you know that English borrowed over 60% of its vocabulary from Latin and French after the Norman conquest? The linguistic colonization patterns are fascinating." Dr. Reynolds' eyebrows rose. She pulled a book from her shelf, a college-level text on sociolinguistics, and opened to a random page. "Can you read this paragraph for me?" Isabella leaned forward, reading fluently. "The phenomenon of code switching in multilingual communities represents not merely a linguistic convenience, but a sophisticated cognitive negotiation between cultural identities, wherein speakers navigate complex social hierarchies through strategic deployment of language registers." She looked up. "This is about how people who speak multiple languages choose which language to use based on social situations. Like how Mama speaks Spanish with her friends from Honduras, but English with her employers. It's not just about words, it's about power and belonging." The room fell silent. "Doctor." Reynolds slowly closed the book, her expression unreadable. Then she pulled out a different text, this one in Mandarin characters. "And this?" Isabella studied it briefly. "This is modern simplified Chinese, but the author is quoting classical texts. They're discussing Confucian concepts of social obligation. It's a philosophical argument about whether traditional Chinese values can coexist with modern individualism." She paused. "The author thinks they can, but I'm not sure I agree. The logical structure has some gaps." Dr. Reynolds set down the book carefully. "Isabella, I need to conduct some assessments. Would that be all right?" What followed was 2 hours of the most unusual testing Marcus had ever witnessed. Dr. Reynolds brought in teachers from various departments, languages, mathematics, sciences. Each tried different approaches, different questions, different challenges. And Isabella navigated them all with a curious mixture of childlike enthusiasm and unsettling brilliance. When they tested her Spanish, she corrected the teacher's Castilian pronunciation, explaining regional dialect variations. When presented with a complex mathematical word problem, she solved it 3 different ways, explaining which method was most efficient and why. When asked about world geography, she didn't just identify countries but discussed historical border changes and their cultural implications. Finally, Dr. Reynolds called Marcus and Maria into her private office. Her expression was careful, measured, but Marcus could see excitement lurking beneath. "Mr. Whitmore, Mrs. Chen, I've been an educator for 32 years. I've worked with gifted children throughout my career, prodigies in music, mathematics, languages. What I've observed today is..." She paused, choosing words carefully. "Isabella's cognitive abilities are extraordinary. Not just advanced, genuinely exceptional. Her verbal reasoning tests in the 99th percentile. Her pattern recognition and analytical thinking exceed college-level standards. But more remarkable than individual scores is the integration. She doesn't just know things. She understands connections between concepts that most people never perceive." Maria gripped her chair. "Is something wrong with her?" "Wrong?" Dr. Reynolds smiled warmly. "Mrs. Chen, nothing is wrong. But Isabella is exceptionally gifted. What concerns me is that she's currently in a standard 2nd grade class learning material she mastered years ago. Every day in that environment is a day her potential isn't being developed." "But she seems happy at her school," Maria said desperately. "She has friends." "Does she, Mama?" Isabella's quiet voice interrupted. All eyes turned to the small girl. "The other kids think I'm weird because I'd rather read than play games. The teacher gets frustrated when I finish assignments too quickly. I pretend to take longer now so she won't be annoyed." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. This brilliant child was deliberately dimming her light to fit in, to make others comfortable. "Harrison Academy has a specialized program for exceptionally gifted students," Dr. Reynolds continued. "Small classes, individualized learning plans, teachers trained to work with advanced minds. Isabella would be challenged appropriately while still having social interaction with intellectual peers. "I can't afford," Maria began. "Mr. Whitmore has established a full scholarship," Dr. Reynolds cut in smoothly. "Isabella would attend at no cost. Additionally, we provide lunch, materials, and transportation if needed." Maria turned to Marcus, her eyes filled with tears. "Why? Why would you do all this for us?" Before Marcus could answer, Isabella spoke up. "Mr. Whitmore, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Yesterday, when I was translating your contract, I noticed something else." Isabella pulled a piece of paper from her backpack. Notes she'd made. "The Liu Corporation's proposal mentioned your father's company specifically. They used a term, yichan, that means inheritance, but with implications of unfinished business, like something from your father's past that still affects you. I didn't mention it yesterday because it seemed personal, but do you know why they'd reference that?" The room temperature seemed to drop. Marcus stared at the small girl, his heart suddenly pounding. His father, Jonathan Whitmore, had died 8 years ago. The original software company had some international dealings before Marcus took over, but he'd assumed they were all settled. "What exactly did it say?" Marcus's voice was hoarse. Isabella read from her notes, translating carefully. "The Whitmore legacy carries debts beyond finance, obligations of honor that span generations. This partnership offers closure to what Jonathan Whitmore left unfinished." "Oh my God," Marcus whispered. "This wasn't just about the merger. They were targeting me specifically, but why? What did my father leave unfinished?" Dr. Reynolds and Maria exchanged confused glances, but Isabella watched Marcus with those unsettling, analytical eyes. "I think," she said slowly, "someone wants something from you that has nothing to do with business. Something personal." Marcus stood abruptly, his mind racing. The contract hadn't been a simple fraud. It was a carefully crafted trap referencing his father's past. What had Jonathan Whitmore done? What secrets had his father kept? "Mrs. Chen, Dr. Reynolds, I need to make some calls," Marcus said tersely. "Isabella, you might have just uncovered something bigger than contract fraud." As they left the academy, Isabella officially enrolled to start the following week. Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that everything was connected. The fraudulent contract. Isabella's impossible abilities appearing in his life at precisely the right moment. The reference to his father's unfinished business. That evening, back in his office, Marcus pulled out boxes of his father's old files that he'd never fully examined. Somewhere in the decades of documents, there had to be answers. He didn't notice Maria entering quietly with Isabella until the small girl spoke. "Mr. Whitmore, I found something else." Isabella held up another paper. "When I was looking at your father's signature on old documents in your office yesterday, I noticed something strange. The signature changed slightly 18 years ago. The way he wrote the W, it became more angular, almost protective, like he was guarding something. People's handwriting changes when they're stressed or hiding something." Marcus froze. 18 years ago. The year before he'd graduated from business school. The year his father had suddenly insisted he study overseas, sent him to England for an unexpected semester abroad despite Marcus's protests. "Isabella, are you saying my father's handwriting suggests he was hiding something starting 18 years ago?" "I'm saying his signature shows psychological stress markers that persisted until the last documents I saw from 7 years ago, right before he died. And," Isabella hesitated, an unusual uncertainty for her. "Mr. Whitmore, I found a photo in one of your old files, your father with a Chinese woman and a little girl. On the back, someone wrote in Mandarin, 'Some debts can never be repaid.' It was dated 19 years ago." The world tilted. Marcus grabbed the photo Isabella offered. There was his father, younger, smiling with a beautiful Chinese woman holding a small child. The woman looked. Marcus's breath caught. The woman looked remarkably like Maria Chen. "Where did you find this?" Marcus demanded. "In a file marked personal, do not open." "I'm sorry, Mr. Whitmore. I know I shouldn't have looked, but the handwriting was the same as the signature changes, and I thought..." "Isabella, it's okay." Marcus's hands shook. "You might have just uncovered the biggest secret of my father's life. Maybe of my life." Maria had gone pale. "Mr. Whitmore, I don't understand. What does this mean?" Marcus stared at the photo, then at Maria, then at Isabella. the extraordinarily gifted 7-year-old who'd appeared in his life like an impossible miracle? I don't know yet, he said slowly, but I intend to find out. And Isabella, I'm going to need your help translating everything in my father's files. Everything in Chinese, because I think Jonathan Whitmore had a whole second life that nobody knew about. As Maria held her daughter close and Marcus spread decades of documents across his desk, none of them realized they were standing at the edge of a revelation that would shatter everything they thought they knew about family, loyalty, and love. The first pieces of the puzzle were in place, but the picture they'd reveal would be more shocking than any of them could imagine. And the question that would haunt Marcus for days to come was already forming in his mind. If his father had been involved with a Chinese woman 19 years ago, and if that somehow connected to Isabella Chen's existence now, what secret had Jonathan Whitmore died protecting? And why did Isabella's brilliant mind seem designed to uncover it? The answers were coming, and they would change everything. 3 days of investigation had turned Marcus's office into a detective's war room. Documents covered every surface, organized by date and language. Isabella came each afternoon after her last day at her old school, translating her way through Jonathan Whitmore's hidden past with methodical precision. "Mr. Whitmore, this letter is important," Isabella said on Thursday evening, her small voice cutting through Marcus's frustrated examination of financial records. "It's from 20 years ago. Your father wrote it in Mandarin to someone named Lin Mei." Marcus abandoned his laptop immediately. "What does it say?" Isabella's face scrunched in concentration. "It's romantic, but also sad. He writes, 'Lin Mei, my brilliant star, you have given me the greatest gift any man could receive, but my obligations in America make it impossible to honor you as you deserve. I will ensure you and our daughter want for nothing, but I cannot give you my name. Please forgive me for being too weak to choose courage over convenience.'" The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Our daughter. He's talking about a daughter. Isabella, is there a date? August 1998. And Mr. Whitmore? Isabella's voice became very quiet. "There's more. In a different folder, I found bank statements. Your father sent monthly payments to someone named Lin Mei Chen in San Francisco for 18 years. $15,000 every month. The last payment was dated 3 months before he died." Maria, who'd been quietly organizing documents, made a small sound. Marcus turned to see her face drained of color. "Maria, do you recognize that name?" "Lin Mei Chen was my mother," Maria whispered. "She died when I was 21. Car accident in San Francisco. She raised me alone. Always told me my father was a businessman who couldn't stay. She never told me his name." Her voice broke. "Mr. Whitmore, are you saying your father was, that were—" The implications crashed over Marcus like a tsunami. If Jonathan Whitmore had sent payments to Lin Mei Chen for 18 years, and if Maria was Lin Mei's daughter, then Maria wasn't just his employee. She was his half-sister. And Isabella wasn't just a gifted child he was helping. She was his niece. "Oh my God," Marcus breathed. "Isabella, how old is your mother?" 38, same as you, Mr. Whitmore." Isabella answered, her brilliant mind clearly already processing the mathematics. "Which means if your father was with my grandmother in 1998, 20 years ago, and Mama was born." "Mama, when's your birthday?" "June 15th, 1987, Maria said numbly. 9 months after my mother came to America from Beijing. She told me she'd met someone in China, but he had another life in America. She came here hoping. But he was already married to your mother, wasn't he, Mr. Whitmore?" Marcus sank into his chair, his mind reeling. His father, the man he'd idolized, had maintained a secret second family in San Francisco for years. Had a daughter, Maria. He'd supported financially, but never acknowledged. And Marcus had been completely blind to it. "The semester abroad," Marcus said slowly. 18 years ago, my father suddenly sent me to England. I was supposed to graduate from Stanford, but he insisted I finish my last term at Oxford. I was furious, thought he was being controlling, but that was right after the signature changes Isabella noticed. He was protecting the secret, keeping me away so I wouldn't accidentally discover Maria's existence. "Did you know anything about us?" Maria's voice held no accusation, only exhausted sadness. "Did your mother?" "No, nothing. My mother, Catherine, died when I was 16. Cancer. If she knew about you, she never said anything. Marcus looked at Maria, really looked at her, and saw it now. The shape of her eyes was like his. The stubborn set of her jaw matched his own. How had he not noticed before? Maria, I'm so sorry. For all of it. For our father's choices. For the years you struggled while I had everything. It's not your fault. Maria said quietly. You didn't know. But I should have asked questions. When my father died, I inherited everything. The company, the properties, investments. There was a trust I didn't question, set aside for confidential obligations. I assumed it was some business arrangement. I never looked deeper. Shame burned through Marcus. That money was for you, wasn't it? After he died, those payments stopped, and you were left with nothing. Maria nodded slowly. My mother had been sick for a year before the accident. The medical bills used up all her savings. When the monthly deposits stopped coming, I didn't know why or who'd been sending them. I just knew I was suddenly completely alone with a 2-year-old daughter and no money. That's when I started cleaning houses. The weight of his father's betrayal and his own ignorant complicity crushed down on Marcus. While Maria had been drowning, he'd been building an empire on their father's foundation, never questioning where all that initial capital had come from or what secrets it hid. Mr. Whitmore? Isabella's small voice broke the heavy silence. If you and Mama have the same father, that makes you my uncle, right? And it means I'm part of your family. Marcus looked at the small girl, this extraordinary child who'd stumbled into his life and unraveled everything. Family. He'd been alone since his mother died, believing himself the sole heir to the Whitmore legacy. Now in 3 days he'd discovered he had a sister and a niece. Yes, Isabella, you're my family. Both of you are. Marcus stood, moving to where Maria sat frozen. Maria, I know this is overwhelming. I know you probably hate my father, hate me, for everything that happened. But I want to make this right. The money that should have been yours, I don't want your money. Maria interrupted, her voice stronger now. I never knew about any of this. My mother told me my father couldn't be in our lives, and I accepted it. She gave me a good childhood with what we had. I made a life for Isabella. We've been fine. You've been struggling, Marcus said gently, working 2 jobs, living in a studio apartment, unable to afford the education your daughter needs. Maria, that's not fine. That's our father's failure, and it's mine too. But it doesn't have to continue. What are you saying? Marcus took a deep breath, his mind clicking into the decisive mode that had built his business empire. But this wasn't business. This was family, messy, complicated, and far more important than any deal. I'm saying that you and Isabella are Whitmores. You deserve everything that name entails. Not as charity, not as guilt payment, but as your birthright. He pulled out his phone, texting his lawyer rapidly. Starting tomorrow, I'm establishing a trust in your name, Maria. The money our father should have left you, with 20 years of interest, it's not mine to keep. Marcus, I can't. Yes, you can and you will, for Isabella. Marcus crouched down to meet his niece's eyes. Isabella, your mother and I need to figure out a lot of complicated adult things. But here's what I want you to know. You're brilliant, you're special, and now you have an uncle who's going to make sure you have every opportunity to become whatever you want to be. Okay? Isabella studied him with those unsettling, wise eyes. Uncle Marcus, there's still something wrong with the puzzle. Grandmother Lynn May died 7 years ago, right when your father's payments stopped. But why did the Liu Corporation reference unfinished business now? If the secret was just about hidden family, that doesn't explain why they'd try to trap you with a fraudulent contract. Marcus felt cold realization dawn. You're right. This isn't just about family secrets. Someone else knows about you and Maria, and they're trying to use that information against me. Maria stood abruptly. Marcus, if someone's targeting you because of us, maybe we should leave, go somewhere safe. No. Marcus's voice was firm. Nobody threatens my family, not anymore. Isabella, I need you to look at those Liu Corporation documents again. Look for any other references to my father or your grandmother. There's another layer to this. As Isabella dove back into the documents with renewed focus, Marcus pulled out his phone. His head of security, James Crawford, answered on the first ring. James, I need background checks on the Liu Corporation executives. Deep checks, family connections, business history, anything tied to China or San Francisco in the last 20 years. And I need it by morning. After hanging up, Marcus found Maria standing by the window, staring out at the Seattle skyline. He joined her silently. I don't know how to process this, Maria finally said. This morning I was your housekeeper. Tonight I'm your sister. Everything's changed, but also nothing has. I'm still me. Isabella's still Isabella. But now you're not alone, Marcus said quietly. Maria, I know we're strangers who happen to share DNA. I know trust isn't automatic. But I meant what I said. Your family. And I protect my family. Maria turned to him, tears streaming down her face. Why does it feel like our father's still manipulating everything, even from the grave? All these secrets, all these revelations. It's like he planned for us to find each other this way. Maybe he did, Marcus mused. That trust fund I mentioned, it had instructions that it would be released to me only when I turned 38 or if certain conditions were met. I turned 38 last month. Maybe he knew the truth would come out eventually. Maybe he wanted us to find each other. Or maybe, Isabella called out from across the room, he was trying to protect you both. Uncle Marcus, I found another letter. This one's different. It's in English, addressed to you, sealed in an envelope marked, to be opened only if Marcus discovers the truth about Maria. With shaking hands, Marcus took the envelope. The handwriting was definitely his father's, that same angular script Isabella had identified. He broke the seal and read, My dear son, if you're reading this, you've discovered the greatest shame and the greatest joy of my life. Maria and Isabella are real as you, and my failure to publicly acknowledge them is my deepest regret. I was a coward, Marcus. I loved Lin May, but I loved my comfortable American life more. When your mother died, I had the chance to bring Maria and Lin May into our lives properly. But I was afraid of scandal, afraid of damaging the business, afraid of what people would think. I sent you away that year because you almost discovered them. You would have insisted on doing the right thing, and I knew that would force me to choose. So I sent you abroad and continued my half-life, supporting them financially but never giving them what they truly needed. A father. By the time I realized my mistake, Lin May had died, and Maria was on her own with her daughter. I wanted to reach out to help properly, but my cancer diagnosis came and I was out of time. I'm sorry, son. Sorry for leaving you alone. Sorry for leaving Maria abandoned. Sorry for all the choices that let wealth and fear override love. There's something else you need to know. Lin May had a brother, Wu Chen, who remained in China. He believed I used his sister and discarded her. He made threats before Lin May died. Said the Whitmore family owed a debt that would be collected. I thought he was just grieving, but he has connections in Chinese business. If he ever comes after you, know that his anger is justified even if his methods aren't. Marcus, you have a chance I squandered. You can give Maria and Isabella the family they deserved all along. You can make right what I made wrong. Please don't let my cowardice define their future. I love you, son. I love all my children, even the ones I was too weak to claim. Father Marcus finished reading, his vision blurred with tears. He handed the letter to Maria, watching her face crumble as she absorbed their father's words. Wu Chen, Isabella said softly. Uncle Marcus, could Liu Corporation be connected to him? Could he be using them to target you? That's exactly what I think, Marcus replied grimly. The contract was never about business, it was about revenge. Wu Chen waited years, watching, planning. Then Isabella's abilities brought her into my life, and when you helped me, you triggered something. He knows about you now. He knows I've discovered the family connection, and he's going to use that. Maria looked terrified. What do we do? Marcus set his jaw. The same stubborn determination that had built his empire now focused on a different kind of battle. We fight back, together, as a family. Wu Chen wants to collect a debt? Fine. I'll meet with him. I'll own our father's mistakes and make restitution. But he will not harm you or Isabella, that's non-negotiable. Uncle Marcus, Isabella said, her voice small but steady. If we're family now, can I help? I can translate anything Mr. Wu Chen says. I can read his real intentions in the language he uses. Marcus looked at his 7-year-old niece. Brilliant, brave, and completely unaware of the danger she'd walked into. His instinct was to protect her, hide her away. But Isabella wasn't ordinary. Her mind was her greatest weapon, and trying to shield her from the truth would insult the very intelligence that had brought them all together. "Yes," he said finally. "You can help. But Isabella, you have to promise me something. If things get dangerous, you listen to your mother and me immediately. No arguments, deal?" "Deal." Isabella smiled, the first genuine childlike smile he'd seen from her. "I've never had an uncle before, or anyone except Mama. This is nice." As the small girl returned to organizing documents, Marcus and Maria stood together in the center of the chaos that had become his office. Brother and sister, strangers and family, facing a storm that had been building since before Isabella was born. "We're going to get through this," Marcus said quietly. Maria nodded, squeezing his hand. Together. Neither of them saw the shadow outside Marcus's office window. A figure watching from the building across the street, phone pressed to ear, reporting in Mandarin that the Whitmore family had finally been reunited. The trap Wu Chen had spent 7 years setting was finally ready to spring. And the debt he intended to collect wasn't money. It was far more personal than that. The meeting was set for Saturday morning at a neutral location, the Golden Dragon restaurant, closed to the public for the occasion. Marcus had wanted a public setting to ensure safety, but Wu Chen had insisted on privacy. After consultation with his security team, Marcus had agreed, but only if James Crawford and 2 other guards were present. Maria had wanted to stay home with Isabella, but the girl had been adamant. "If this is about grandmother, I should be there. Uncle Marcus needs me to translate not just the words, but the meanings behind them." Now they sat at a large circular table. Marcus, Maria, Isabella, and James Crawford facing 3 empty chairs. The restaurant's owner, an elderly woman named Mrs. Lin, had reluctantly allowed the meeting at Wu Chen's request. She clearly knew more than she was saying, her worried eyes darting between Marcus's group and the door. At precisely 10 o'clock, the door opened. 3 people entered. The man in front was in his 60s, distinguished in a tailored suit, his face carved from stone. Behind him came a younger man, probably late 30s, who Marcus recognized from Liu Corporation's website as their CFO, David Liu. And behind them both walked a teenage girl, perhaps 16, with the same intense analytical eyes Marcus had come to recognize in Isabella. Wu Chen sat directly across from Marcus, studying him with open hostility. But when his gaze shifted to Maria, something cracked in his expression, and when he saw Isabella, he went completely still. "Lin Mei," he whispered in Mandarin, staring at Maria. "You look so much like your mother. I would have known you anywhere." Isabella, sitting beside Marcus, translated softly. "He says Mama looks like grandmother." "I know what he said," Maria replied in Mandarin, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "My mother taught me her language, Uncle Wu, even if she couldn't teach me about my father's family." Wu Chen flinched at the word uncle, but he recovered quickly. "You should not call me that. I renounced your father's family when Jonathan Whitmore abandoned my sister." "Then why are we here?" Marcus kept his voice level, professional. "Mr. Wu, you've been orchestrating attacks on my company. The fraudulent contract was just the beginning, wasn't it? I've had 3 cybersecurity breaches in the past week, all traced to Chinese servers connected to Liu Corporation. You want something from me, so let's skip the games and discuss terms." Wu Chen smiled coldly. "Direct, like your father. Jonathan was always efficient when it suited him, less so when it required courage." He gestured to David Liu. "Show him." David Liu placed a folder on the table. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, spanning 20 years. Jonathan Whitmore with Lin Mei, Jonathan with baby Maria, Jonathan sending money through intermediaries. And recent photos too. Maria cleaning Marcus's penthouse, Isabella at the library, the 2 of them struggling with groceries in the rain. "I've been watching your sister and niece for 7 years, Mr. Whitmore," Wu Chen said softly. "Since my sister died and Jonathan's payments stopped. I watched Maria work herself to exhaustion. I watched Isabella grow up brilliant and ignored, her gifts wasted because her mother couldn't afford to develop them. And I watched you, Jonathan's acknowledged son, build your empire on money that should have been shared. I didn't know they existed, Marcus said tightly. Ignorance is not innocence. You benefited from Jonathan's choices. You inherited everything while Maria inherited nothing. That is injustice. Wu Chen leaned forward. I spent 7 years planning how to make the Whitmore family pay. The fraudulent contract was meant to destroy you financially, as Jonathan destroyed my sister emotionally. But then something interesting happened. He looked at Isabella, who met his gaze fearlessly. This child, my grandniece, saved you, with abilities that should have made her renowned, celebrated. Instead, she was invisible, helping the very man who'd profited from her grandmother's abandonment. Ironic, isn't it? What do you want? Marcus asked bluntly. Money? The company? Name your price. There is no price, Wu Chen said. I want acknowledgement. I want the world to know what Jonathan Whitmore did. I want Maria and Isabella recognized as Whitmores, publicly, with all that entails. I want you to admit your father was a liar and a coward who betrayed my sister. The demand hung in the air. Marcus felt Maria's hand on his arm, warning him to think carefully. Publicly exposing his father's affair would damage the Whitmore name, potentially affect the company's reputation, and invite media scrutiny that would be brutal for Maria and Isabella. But before Marcus could respond, Isabella spoke up in Mandarin, her clear child's voice cutting through the tension. Great Uncle Wu, may I ask you something? Wu Chen's expression softened fractionally. You speak Mandarin beautifully, child. Better than your grandmother did even. What do you wish to ask? Did grandmother Lin Mei love my grandfather Jonathan? The question clearly caught Wu Chen off guard. Yes. She loved him deeply, too deeply. That was her tragedy. And did he love her? Isabella persisted. He claimed to. But love that hides is not real love. Isabella tilted her head thoughtfully. But if he sent money for 18 years and wrote letters and tried to make sure grandmother and mama were taken care of, doesn't that mean he loved them the best way he knew how? Even if it wasn't the right way. Isabella, Maria started, but Wu Chen held up a hand. Continue, child. You're angry because grandfather hurt grandmother. That's fair, but hurting Uncle Marcus won't fix what happened. It won't bring grandmother back. It won't change that mama grew up without a father. Isabella's voice was steady, mature beyond her years. You watched us for 7 years. You saw mama struggle. If you wanted to help, why didn't you? Why wait to use us as weapons against Uncle Marcus? The teenage girl behind Wu Chen made a small sound, almost like a suppressed laugh. Wu Chen shot her a warning look before turning back to Isabella. Because I wanted justice. Justice or revenge? Isabella asked quietly. Mama and I don't need revenge. We needed help, and now Uncle Marcus is giving it. Not because you forced him, but because we're family. Isn't that better than destroying each other? Wu Chen sat back, clearly wrestling with something. Finally, he spoke in English, perhaps so everyone could understand. You are your grandmother's granddaughter. She was always too forgiving, too ready to see the good in people who didn't deserve it. Maybe, Isabella acknowledged, but grandmother also taught Mama to be strong and independent, and Mama taught me to solve problems, not create them. Great Uncle Wu, don't you think grandmother would want us to be a family, not divided by anger? The silence stretched. Marcus hardly dared breathe. His 7-year-old niece was negotiating with a man who'd spent years planning his destruction, and somehow, impossibly, she was winning. Wu Chen finally spoke, his voice rough. What would you have me do, child? Walk away after 7 years of planning? Pretend Jonathan Whitmore didn't betray my sister? No, Isabella said firmly. Grandfather Jonathan did wrong, but Uncle Marcus wants to make it right. He gave us money, got me into a good school, promoted Mama. He's been trying to fix things for only a week, but he's done more than anyone else ever did. Maybe instead of fighting, you could help. You're Mama's uncle by blood, that makes you my family too. Why can't we all be family together? Maria was crying silently. Marcus felt his own throat tight. The girl was doing what no lawyer, no business negotiation could do. She was appealing to the humanity Wu Chen had buried under years of rage. The teenage girl behind Wu Chen finally spoke, her English accented but clear. "Father, perhaps we should listen to her. This isn't what Aunt Lin Mei would have wanted." Wu Chen turned sharply. "Mei Ling. I'm named after her," the girl continued, addressing Marcus. "Aunt Lin Mei was my father's older sister. I never met her, but father has told me stories all my life. She was kind, forgiving, and always believed in family reconciliation. Father has been angry for so long, but..." She looked at Isabella with something like admiration. "Maybe this child is right. Maybe vengeance isn't what our family needs." Wu Chen closed his eyes. When he opened them, the hatred had dimmed, replaced by exhausted grief. Lin Mei died believing Jonathan would eventually come for her. "Even after your mother died, Mr. Whitmore, even when it would have been safe for him to acknowledge Maria, he didn't. My sister died waiting for a man who never chose her. That is what I cannot forgive." "I can't forgive it either," Marcus said quietly. "Mr. Wu, my father was wrong. He was a coward who put reputation before love. I can't change that. But I can promise that Maria and Isabella will never be hidden or ignored again. They're Whitmores, publicly and proudly. And if you're willing, they're also Chens, connected to your family, to their Chinese heritage, to everything our father tried to erase. You would acknowledge the connection publicly?" Wu Chen's voice was skeptical. "Even knowing it might damage your precious company reputation? The company can survive scandal. But I can't survive knowing I continued my father's mistakes. Maria and Isabella are my family. I won't hide them." Wu Chen studied Marcus for a long moment, then turned to Maria. "And you, Lin Mei's daughter? What do you want?" Maria wiped her tears, her voice finding strength. "I want my daughter to know her heritage, both American and Chinese. I want her to have the opportunities she deserves. And I want..." She paused, looking at Wu Chen with sudden intensity. "I want you to tell me about my mother. The real her, not the broken woman who waited for a man who never came. Tell me who Lin Mei was before Jonathan Whitmore. Give me that piece of her, me that." Something shifted in Wu Chen's expression, grief giving way to bittersweet memory. "Your mother was brilliant. She studied linguistics at Beijing University, spoke 6 languages by the time she was 20. She wanted to be a translator for the United Nations to bridge cultures and bring understanding." His voice softened. "She met Jonathan at an international business conference. He was charming, ambitious, promised her the world, and she believed him. So I got my languages from her." Isabella breathed. "My abilities aren't random. They're from grandmother." "Yes, child. Your grandmother would have been so proud of you." Wu Chen looked at the small girl with undisguised emotion. She always said that language was the key to understanding, that if people truly understood each other's words, they couldn't sustain hatred. She was naive, perhaps, but beautiful in that naivety. "She wasn't naive," Isabella said firmly. "She was hopeful. There's a difference. And Great Uncle Wu, I think she'd want you to be hopeful too, to give Uncle Marcus and Mama a chance, to let us be family." The restaurant fell silent except for the gentle whir of the air conditioning. Marcus watched Wu Chen's internal struggle, knowing that the next moments would determine whether they'd build something new or destroy each other. Finally, Wu Chen spoke in Mandarin, his voice breaking. "Lin Mei, I tried to avenge you. But your granddaughter has your heart, and I cannot fight against that." He stood, bowing formally to Maria. "Niece, I apologize for using you and your daughter as pawns. It was unworthy of your mother's memory." Then, shockingly, he bowed to Marcus. "Jonathan Whitmore's son, I do not forgive your father. But perhaps Isabella is right. Perhaps destroying you serves no purpose. I propose a different arrangement." "What kind of arrangement?" Marcus asked carefully. "Liu Corporation has resources in China that could benefit Whitmore Technologies' Asian expansion. Real resources, legitimate partnerships. We could work together, not as victim and perpetrator, but as family businesses. The Chens and Whitmores finally united in something constructive." Marcus felt his business instincts warring with lingering suspicion, but Isabella's eager face made the decision. "I'd be open to discussing that, under proper legal terms, with transparency." Agreed. Wu Chen gestured to his daughter. Mei Ling is studying international business at Stanford. Perhaps she and Isabella could know each other as cousins. Perhaps we can build what our previous generation destroyed. I'd like that, Mei Ling said, smiling at Isabella. I've always wanted a younger cousin, especially one who speaks better Mandarin than I do. As the tension finally broke, Mrs. Lin emerged from the kitchen with tea and dim sum, tears streaming down her weathered face. Lin Mei would be so happy, she said in Mandarin. She always believed family could heal. Always. The rest of the morning passed in cautious but genuine conversation. Wu Chen told stories of Lin Mei's childhood, making Maria laugh and cry in equal measure. Mei Ling and Isabella discovered a shared love of languages and puzzles, already planning study sessions. And Marcus, watching his newly discovered family slowly knit together, felt something he hadn't experienced since his mother died. Hope. But as they finally prepared to leave, David Liu pulled Marcus aside. Mr. Whitmore, there's one more thing you should know. Wu Chen wasn't the only one watching your family. There are others in China who knew about Lin Mei and your father. Business rivals, political operatives. Now that you're acknowledging Maria publicly, they may see it as weakness. An opportunity. Marcus felt cold realization dawn. You're saying this isn't over. I'm saying be careful. The Whitmore name carries weight in America. But in China, the past is never truly buried. Your father made promises he didn't keep, signed contracts he didn't honor, all because he was distracted by his secret life. Those debts still exist. As David Liu walked away, Marcus looked at Maria, Isabella, and Wu Chen sharing photographs on a phone, bridging decades of separation with tentative joy. He'd just gained a family, found his father's redemption, and potentially saved his company. But something told him the real test was still coming. And when it did, he'd need every ounce of Isabella's brilliance, Maria's strength, and Wu Chen's connections to survive it. The question was, would the fragile family bonds they'd just formed be strong enough to withstand what was coming? The answer would arrive sooner than any of them expected. 2 weeks later, Marcus stood in the Whitmore Technologies boardroom, facing 12 skeptical board members. Maria sat beside him, impeccably dressed in a designer suit he'd insisted on buying. Isabella, who should have been at Harrison Academy, sat quietly in the corner with her ever-present books. Marcus had pulled her from school for this crucial meeting at her own insistence. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to do. I've called this emergency meeting to inform you of significant changes to the Whitmore Technologies ownership structure and to introduce you to my family. Some of you knew my father, Jonathan Whitmore. What you didn't know is that he had another daughter, my half-sister Maria Chen and her daughter Isabella. The room erupted. Board members spoke over each other, demanding explanations, threatening legal action, questioning the legitimacy of the claim. Marcus had expected this. What he hadn't expected was Isabella standing up, walking calmly to the head of the table and speaking in a clear, authoritative voice that belied her 7 years. Excuse me, please. I have documents. The room fell silent, shocked into quiet by the small child commandeering their meeting. Isabella placed a folder on the table, opening it with practiced efficiency. This is the DNA test confirming that Maria Chen and Marcus Whitmore share a father. These are financial records showing 18 years of payments from Jonathan Whitmore to Lin Mei Chen. This is Jonathan Whitmore's own letter acknowledging Maria as his daughter. Isabella methodically laid out evidence with the precision of a seasoned lawyer. The legal team has verified everything. Mama is Uncle Marcus's sister. That's not negotiable. It's scientific fact. Richard Sterling, the oldest board member and longtime family friend, spoke first. Even if this is true, introducing a previously unknown heir could destabilize company ownership. Marcus, this is exactly the kind of scandal our competitors will exploit. Let them try, Marcus replied firmly. Maria isn't asking for control or ownership. She has her own trust fund now, funds my father should have left her 20 years ago. This isn't about money or power. It's about doing what's right. Doing what's right doesn't always align with good business, Sterling countered. Your father kept this secret for a reason. My father kept this secret because he was a coward, Marcus interrupted, his voice hard. A brilliant businessman, yes, a visionary, certainly, but also a man who abandoned his own child. I won't compound his mistakes by hiding Maria and Isabella now. Uncle Marcus is also making a strategic decision, Isabella piped up again, earning surprised looks. By acknowledging Mama publicly, he removes the leverage anyone might have used against him. Secrets are only powerful when they're hidden. Once revealed, they lose their threat value. Several board members actually smiled at that. Catherine Morrison, the company's CFO, leaned forward. The child has a point. Marcus, if you'd tried to keep this hidden and someone else exposed it, the damage would have been catastrophic. Taking control of the narrative shows strength. There's another consideration, Marcus continued, clicking to bring up a presentation. Maria's uncle, Wu Chen, is the silent partner behind Liu Corporation. What started as a revenge plot has evolved into a genuine partnership opportunity. Liu Corporation has manufacturing connections and distribution networks in China that could accelerate our Asian expansion by 5 years. But that only works if we're dealing with them as family partners, not enemies. The business proposition captured the board's attention immediately. Marcus spent the next hour detailing the proposed partnership, the financial projections, and the strategic advantages. By the end, even the skeptics were nodding thoughtfully. But then Sterling dropped his bombshell. Marcus, I appreciate the family reunion and the business opportunity, but there's something you need to know. I was your father's closest friend for 40 years. He told me about Lin May before he died, made me promise to watch over Maria and Isabella if anything happened to you. Marcus froze. You knew? All these years you knew they existed? I knew, and I kept my distance because Jonathan made me swear not to interfere unless absolutely necessary. He was terrified that acknowledging Maria would destroy your relationship, would make you see him as a failure. Sterling's voice was heavy with old regret. He died believing you'd hate him if you knew the truth. I don't hate him, Marcus said quietly. I pity him. He could have had a relationship with Maria. He could have known Isabella. Instead, he died alone with his secrets. Actually, Isabella interjected, Grandfather Jonathan did try to fix things at the end. Mr. Sterling, you've been sending anonymous gifts to Mama for 7 years, haven't you? The scholarship applications that arrived right when I needed them? The medical insurance that mysteriously covered my broken arm? That was you, following Grandfather's instructions. Sterling looked stunned. How could you possibly know that? The handwriting on the envelopes matched old notes in Grandfather's files, and the timing was too perfect to be coincidence. You were trying to help without revealing the connection. Isabella smiled gently. Thank you, Mr. Sterling. Those gifts made a real difference. The old man's eyes filled with tears. Your grandmother Lin May would be so proud of you, child. And your grandfather would be too, despite everything. The meeting concluded with a unanimous vote to publicly acknowledge Maria and Isabella as part of the Whitmore family and to pursue the partnership with Liu Corporation. As board members filed out, many stopped to introduce themselves to Maria and marvel at Isabella's precocious intelligence. But the real surprise came when Marcus's executive assistant rushed in, interrupting the post-meeting conversations. Mr. Whitmore, we have a situation. The Shanghai office is reporting that someone's attempting a hostile takeover bid, targeting our weakest international patents. They're claiming Jonathan Whitmore stole proprietary technology from a Chinese research firm 20 years ago. Marcus felt his blood run cold. David Liu's warning echoed. Your father made promises he didn't keep. Those debts still exist. Who's making the claim? Marcus demanded. A company called Chentech Industries. They're alleging your father promised them co-ownership of several software patents in exchange for research collaboration. But he filed the patents solely under Whitmore Technologies. They have documentation, contracts, emails, research notes. Wu Chen, who'd been sitting quietly throughout the board meeting, stood abruptly. Chentech was my brother-in-law's company, Lin May's first husband before she met your father. He died 12 years ago, but his son runs the company now. If they're making this claim, it means they have evidence. Maria grabbed Marcus's arm. Could Grandfather have actually stolen technology? I don't know, Marcus admitted, his mind racing. But if he did, and if it can be proven, it could invalidate decades of patents. The company could be exposed to billions in liability claims. "Uncle Marcus," Isabella said quietly, her brilliant mind already working. "May I see the patents in question and the documentation from Chen Tech? If grandfather used Chinese research without proper attribution, there would be linguistic traces in the original code comments and documentation. I can identify whether the core work was American or Chinese in origin." Marcus wanted to refuse. This was too much pressure for a 7-year-old child. But looking at Isabella's steady, confident expression, he realized she wasn't asking out of childish curiosity. She was offering her unique ability to save the company her grandfather had built, even if that company was built on questionable foundations. "Get her everything," Marcus told his assistant. "If anyone can find the truth buried in technical documentation, it's Isabella." What followed was 72 hours of intensive investigation that would become legendary in the company's history. Isabella, working with Wu Chen's translation team and Whitmore's legal department, examined thousands of pages of documents. She identified code comments in Mandarin that predated Jonathan Whitmore's patent filings. She traced email exchanges showing Jonathan had indeed collaborated with Chen Tech, but had deliberately filed patents under his own name, while his Chinese partners were in the middle of their own filing process. The evidence was damning. Jonathan Whitmore had essentially stolen technology that should have been co-owned, giving Whitmore Technologies a foundation built partially on appropriated research. Late Sunday night, Marcus sat in his office with Maria, Isabella, Wu Chen, and his legal team, staring at the undeniable proof of his father's theft. "We could fight it," his lead attorney suggested. "The Chinese company waited years to file claims. Statute of limitations might protect us." "No," Marcus said firmly. "My father was wrong. If the technology was stolen, we make restitution. Full stop." "Marcus, that could cost the company $1 billion or more," the attorney protested. "Then it costs $1 billion. I won't build my legacy on my father's theft, just like I won't hide my father's second family." Marcus looked at Wu Chen. "Can you facilitate negotiations with Chen Tech? Family to family, finding an equitable solution?" Wu Chen nodded slowly. "They're more likely to negotiate if you're offering genuine acknowledgement and compensation, rather than forcing them into prolonged litigation. I can reach out." Over the next week, Marcus worked with Chen Tech to structure a deal that was painful but fair. Whitmore Technologies would pay substantial damages, grant retroactive co-ownership of several patents, and establish a joint research foundation in Lin Mei's name to support Chinese-American technological collaboration. The financial hit was enormous, dropping the company's value by almost 20% overnight. But the response from the business community was unexpected. Rather than seeing weakness, analysts praised Marcus's integrity. Headlines read, "Whitmore CEO chooses ethics over profits," and "Tech giant acknowledges past wrongs, sets new standard for corporate responsibility." The final board meeting to approve the Chen Tech settlement was tense but ultimately unanimous. As members voted, Richard Sterling stood to speak. "Jonathan Whitmore was my closest friend, and I loved him like a brother. But he was a flawed man who made choices that haunt us even now. His son, however, is proving to be something Jonathan never was, courageous enough to face ugly truths and strong enough to make them right. I'm proud to serve under Marcus Whitmore's leadership." The room erupted in applause. Marcus felt tears sting his eyes as he looked at Maria, beaming with pride, and Isabella, who simply nodded as if to say, "You did the right thing." 3 months later, Marcus stood in a very different setting. The grand ballroom of the Fairmont Olympic Hotel, decorated for a celebration that had been years overdue. The banner read, "The Whitmore Chen Family Foundation Launch." Maria, stunning in an elegant gown, stood beside him as they addressed a crowd of Seattle's business elite, media, and most importantly, the entire extended Chen family, who'd flown in from China for the occasion. Wu Chen and his daughter Mei Ling sat in the front row. Richard Sterling dabbed at his eyes, and Isabella, wearing a beautiful dress that she'd picked out herself, clutched a speech she'd written for the occasion. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, his voice carrying through the room, "3 months ago I didn't know I had a sister. I didn't know I had a niece. I didn't know that my father had lived a double life or that his choices had hurt so many people. But I also didn't know what family really meant. He gestured to Maria. My sister Maria raised an extraordinary child while working 2 jobs and struggling to survive. All because my father was too much of a coward to do right by them. That ends today. The Whitmore Chen Foundation will provide scholarships, research grants, and support for children like Isabella. Brilliant minds who might otherwise be overlooked because they don't fit conventional expectations or come from privileged backgrounds. Maria stepped forward, her voice strong and clear. My mother, Lin May, believed in the power of understanding. That language, culture, and education could bridge any divide. She never stopped believing in the goodness of people, even when life gave her every reason to become bitter. This foundation honors her memory and her hope that the next generation won't repeat our mistakes. Then Isabella approached the microphone, which had to be adjusted down to her height, earning gentle laughter from the audience. She looked tiny at the podium, but when she spoke, her voice carried authority far beyond her years. I'm 7 years old, and 3 months ago, I was invisible. I sat in the back of classrooms reading books that confused my teachers, speaking languages nobody thought I should know. I was weird, different, too much. But then I met my Uncle Marcus and he saw me, really saw me. Not as a problem to be fixed, but as a person with value. Isabella's voice grew stronger. My grandmother Lin May never got to see me. She died thinking her family would always be broken. But she was wrong. Families can heal. My uncle and my mama are proof of that. And this foundation will make sure other kids like me, kids who are different, unusual, extraordinary, get the chance to be seen too. She paused, then added in Mandarin, translated simultaneously for English speakers. Grandmother, I wish you could be here, but I promise that your belief in understanding, in family, in second chances, that will live on through everything we build in your name. Our family may have started broken, but we're going to end up whole. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. As Isabella stepped away from the podium, the ballroom erupted in thunderous applause. Marcus scooped up his niece, holding her as Maria joined them, the 3 Whitmores, finally, publicly, proudly united. Later, as the celebration wound down, Marcus found himself on the hotel's terrace with Wu Chen, looking out over the Seattle skyline. Your father would be proud, Wu Chen said quietly, and he'd be ashamed. A complicated legacy. The best kind, Marcus replied. It means there's room for redemption, room to do better. The child, Isabella, she's exceptional. My sister's gift to the world, perhaps. Lin May's brilliance living on. Wu Chen smiled slightly. She reminds me so much of Lin May at that age. Curious, fearless, determined to understand everything. She's going to change the world, Marcus said with conviction. And I'm going to make sure she has every resource she needs to do it. As they stood in comfortable silence, Isabella emerged onto the terrace, followed by Mei Ling. The 2 girls had become inseparable over the past months, studying languages together, challenging each other's intellects. Uncle Marcus, Mei Ling, and I have been talking, Isabella announced. When I'm older, I want to work for the foundation, not just be supported by it, actually work for it. Finding other kids like me, helping them be seen. Will you let me? Marcus knelt down to his niece's level. Isabella, by the time you're old enough to work for the foundation, you'll probably be running it. Your mother and I are just keeping it warm for you. And maybe, Mei Ling added shyly, I could help too, connecting American and Chinese scholars, building bridges like Aunt Lin May wanted. That sounds perfect, Maria said, joining them on the terrace. She put her arms around both girls. Your grandmother would love knowing her granddaughter and grandniece were carrying on her work together. As the extended family gathered on the terrace, Marcus, Maria, Isabella, Wu Chen, Mei Ling, Richard Sterling, and others who'd become part of their chosen family, Marcus felt something settle in his chest. The weight of his father's mistakes hadn't disappeared. The challenges hadn't vanished. But they were facing everything together as family should. To Lin May, Marcus raised his glass in a toast. To second chances. To hidden genius, finally recognized. And to family, messy, complicated, and absolutely worth fighting for. To family, the group echoed. And as Isabella snuggled between her mother and uncle, her brilliant mind already planning how she'd use the foundation to help others like herself, Marcus realized something profound. His father had spent his life building a business empire, but in trying to hide his mistakes, he'd planted the seeds for something far more valuable. A family that chose to be whole rather than broken, a legacy of redemption rather than regret, and a 7-year-old genius who'd saved not just a company, but everyone's capacity to believe in second chances. The hidden genius wasn't hidden anymore, and her story, their story, was just beginning. The Whitmore-Chen family had a lot of work ahead of them, but they'd face it together, bound not just by blood but by choice, love, and the fierce determination to make right what Jonathan Whitmore had made wrong. And somewhere, Marcus liked to think, his father and Lynn May were finally at peace, watching their children build the family they should have created all along. The end